I'm going to get started and monitor people trying to get in while I'm talking. But I'm Ryan Peterson. I am the founder of a consulting firm called Peterson Consultants and a platform called Complere, which is a new impact-oriented platform for doing research and evaluation. And we'll talk a little bit about that platform, but this is a tool agnostic session, so we're not here to promote any specific tool, and we'll actually jump in between a handful of tools to show you some different functionality. But just quick on my background, I am a career-long philanthropy nonprofit professional who has spent most of my career inside direct service organizations and then also in the last 7 years or so more in philanthropy, impact investing, and came to this work in AI really by launching a research project to try and gather benefit cost analyses from across the country to pull into a single database to try and understand what the themes were across different regions of what researchers were finding were the most impactful approaches to addressing poverty. And in the process of pulling together thousands of studies and trying to figure out how AI can make it more accessible, I've learned a lot. And then over the last year, Will and myself have engaged probably 700 or 800 nonprofit leaders, foundation leaders, starting a year ago with very informal AI working sessions, and then doing a bit more movement into webinars and trainings. And it's all evolving so fast that week to week, we're learning very much. We wouldn't even call ourselves experts, even though we spend a lot of time on this, just because it's really hard to stay on top of everything emerging all the time. And I wouldn't expect anybody here to do that. So I come to this work as an impact-oriented professional and trying to bring useful tools to people like you all and help us all understand whether this is a movement towards more impact and how we use what's available and how do we ask the question. So we'll put in the chat in a second. We do weekly sessions on different topics related to AI. Sometimes it's AI how-to on just basic entry points. We've done prompt engineering sessions. I do weekly demos on Complere. But if you go to our event page, you can register for more, and they're all free at this point. So jump on in. With that, I'll hand it to Will to introduce himself. We are recording this just so everybody's aware, and we will after the session, make sure we review the core recording and we will send out notes after this. So I'm actually going to decline the note taker that someone just requested so we don't have a double of notes taken. But with that, I'll hand it to Will and he'll introduce himself and then we'll dive into this whole landscape analysis process.
Hi, everyone. Morning, good afternoon, from wherever you're joining us. My name is Will Mendoza Torrico. I am the co-founder of I-90. We're an impact-focused consultancy. We help organizations move to their future state from where they are, plan, do change management, do strategic work, do landscape analysis. I particularly focus on it's a handful to name technology-enabled business transformation. Try to take everything that technology is good for and bring it to an organization in a way that it makes sense and it's usable, not just another tech stack that you have to add to your portfolio. Um, I've been working on AI for about 4 years now. Like Ryan said, I would not call myself an expert. I'm a practitioner. Um, I used to work at Cisco in their innovation technology group, and that's how I learned about AI, realized the potential that it had and how it could actually support mission-driven organizations like yours. And from there on, it's just been a diving headfirst, learning, developing new tools, and getting some um, clear answers on how to make it practical and sustainable for organizations rather than another subscription that we need to have. So that's where I'm at today, and I'm happy to join you and be here with Ryan in this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Please, if you have questions throughout, use the chat. I know a number of people have shared where they're zooming in from. Thank you. And we will do our best to monitor and hit questions as we're going through the walkthrough. And then if we miss it, our apologies. We have a number of people on, so hopefully you all have great questions and we get through a good discussion. Um, but if we're at the end of it and you don't get an answer from us, we'll make sure our information is shared and you can follow up with us as well. So we're going to start by diving into Claude. And let me know if everybody's seeing my screen. Sometimes it's hard to tell. And we're using Claude, not necessarily because, like I said earlier, we're promoting Claude by any means, but it is a tool that I've used a lot. A year ago, I was probably using ChatGPT more. And I've just found in recent months that Claude is performing better for me in the sort of knowledge-based work I'm doing. And what you're seeing highlighted here is we've already sort of started the process of walking this through, and I'll run it live. But we also we learned in these sessions that if we try to run everything live, just like any technology, there's a risk that it doesn't work. And so we've sort of also pre-run these just in case Claude goes down or the technology isn't working, which does happen occasionally. Um, and a little bit more backstory is, we've had a lot of conversations over the last year. One of the most common questions I'm getting from funders, nonprofits, policy professionals is really a landscape question of how is this working in this area on this topic? How do we know more about it so that we can decide if we should put more funding there, if our policy should be shifted to address that issue, or if we're developing a nonprofit program, what do we understand about what's already happening that we could make sure we aren't just making decisions in a vacuum. So I think those are some of the reasons we do a landscape analysis. It's really to inform strategic work, strategic planning, funding, and then we have to figure out how do we go through that process. And normally, either you're a skilled researcher or you're working with a policy school or you're hiring a consultant or you're hiring a research agency, which costs, tens of thousands of dollars in most cases if you're hiring a research agency. And we don't want to take their jobs away, but I look at it like that work is still there, but the power of these tools actually has democratized the ability to access the information. And then you still have to have experts in the loop. So if you're not an expert in a topic where you're doing a landscape analysis, my recommendation is we'll teach you how to do it, but then also find the people in your network where you can say, is this right? Is this good? Can you double check this? And then we call that keeping an expert in the loop. Because
And
if you do it all in a vacuum without an expert, you have a lot more risk of using misinformation, not recognizing any hallucinations. And we'll show you how to sort of check for that too. But just advocating for, we're going to teach you something, hopefully give you a skill and a tool, but then also always keep experts in the loop if you're not already the expert. So with that, this is Claude. If you're not in Claude, the interfaces are all generally very similar. They have a chat interface, and maybe I'll just jump back to the what it looks like when we start. So this is how Claude starts, which is how most start. ChatGPT is very similar. Gemini is similar. They're all very similar where they start with this dialog box, the ability to upload something, and switch to different modes, even talk to it. Uh, and then you usually have this expanded sidebar, which shows you all your history chats and projects, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna just jump back into this.
Hey there.
Sorry, is someone coming off mute? Oh, okay. So this is a prompt, and I'm gonna run it live, even though we have it here, just so you can see how it's working. So this is a prompt I developed earlier, and I didn't want to type in front of you for 6 minutes and not type very well. So this was me thinking like, okay, I know this is a complex project, and so I need to be able to start with complex prompts that get to the depth of information that I want to get to. So my process is essentially doing a little bit of a stream of consciousness of, okay, I want to get to depth of understanding of impacts of USAID cuts. And so understand what's happening in the sort of at the organizational level, at the funding level. I wanted to conduct this landscape analysis. So I asked it to actually develop the complex prompts for me that I could use to then move through the landscape analysis. And typically, you want to do this telling it to reference best practice of developing a landscape analysis. So this is actually a prompt I did as sort of a stream of consciousness just to develop the complex prompts to do it. So when I do it, it's going to start working on these detailed prompts. And there's a pretty standard approach to developing prompts now where you have a role, you give it scope, you give it the goals that you want it to accomplish. And then it's going to give you, because I asked it to create three different prompts to get through the project. The first one was to map the landscape. The second was to find the trends and what's happening with the organizations that received USAID funds and use them in the communities where they're working. And then a third prompt that synthesizes all of that into something that maybe is more digestible into a report. Uh,
And Ryan, while it runs, I want to remind people that we've been running several of these webinars. So some of these things, if you're joining for the first time, we've covered the helping how to prompt, the way that it looks. Join other of the sessions that we're doing because that's gonna fill in the gaps. Like a lot of these things we've already walked people through, and if you've been with us, it seems a little more familiar to you. But that's basically what Ryan is trying to show here. He's already leveraging the LLM to build the more powerful prompt rather than trying to come up in a second on, in an instant with the answer. Is actually using the tool to build the right prompt for future chats.
yeah. And I think on that, it's like you, many of you probably have seen like on LinkedIn or wherever, guides to becoming a prompt engineer. And so what I'm showing you is sort of a shortcut to building a prompt and sort of cutting through some of that, what may feel a little scary, like what does it mean to become a prompt engineer? Do I need a certification? Do I have to go get a master's degree for it? It doesn't take that. It really is like go through the iterative process of like, I have an idea. I want to build this. Can you help me structure it? And Will does a great job of teaching this in the other sessions of like, it's an iterative process of getting to the prompt you want to have to produce the output. So right now you can see it's produced these three prompts. Um, and we're actually not, I'm not going to run all of them live because each one of these prompts could take 5+ minutes of it processing. So I'm going to show you what I did in the prompts we ran earlier. Um, and you'll see this sort of crisis landscape with the outputs. Actually, let's see. I think I can jump to this one. Where's prompt number one? There we go. So this is the detailed prompt, and it's all sort of pushed together here in the dialog box. But this spent, and sometimes they'll tell you the time it took to produce the output. But this ran the sort of landscape of the crisis, and it produced a multi-page document. And obviously, we're not going to read every word of it. Uh, and we're going to show you in a second how to check it because the danger is you don't read it at all, you don't cross-check it, you don't share it with somebody else to read it, and it's a bunch of misinformation. But this is going through different sections, so you can see the sections. We'll jump back up. Scale and scope, which is still obviously very summary because it's a big complex issue with lots of resources that is a global scale. Um, Hitting the different sectors, dives into geographic impacts and highlights some of the regions that are impacted, some historical context of foreign aid, um, historical precedents for shifts in this kind of aid. Uh, Major players. You can even see it mentioned Doge, which was a part of the cut. Um, but it's going into a pretty broad set of information on a global scale of the impacts of the cuts of USAID. I'm going to keep going all the way down to the bottom. And then, this one, I thought this was great. They produced a critical unknowns, like what are some questions that we need to answer or address in this crisis. So, and then it produced this output, but I wanted it turned into a document. So all it prompted was turn this into a document so I could download it or print it or look at it in a different way. So then it produced this output for me.
Ryan, also, I think it's worth mentioning that the output it's done through the research option. Is not just the prompt hit enter. Usually, when you have your window, there is a tab and the plus sign where you can ask the LLM that what you're looking for is a deep research that goes into what now it's called agentic mode and on its own starts looking for information. It's a longer process. If you don't do that, you end up with a summary of maybe 2 pages. If you do the deep research, it will go fetch and validate information to a certain degree for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. So here you can see the document, and it did create it as a Word doc, so docx. And if you hit this download button here, it'll download it as a Word document, so you can go in, edit, comment. And this may make it just easier to read for you. So if you're wanting to digest it, and especially if you're an expert in the space, look for things that are exaggerations of data points or hallucinations, you can read it through. But you can see within, and this probably took 3 to 5 minutes to produce. That probably would have taken someone weeks, if not months, to do the research and pull together a well-organized report. So I'm just going to scroll through. It's 9 pages long, and then we'll jump into the prompt number 2.
Uh, Up to this point, does anybody has any questions? Is this initial part of the process clear? Feel free to ask directly, or if you want to write it on the chat.
Keep
Hi,
clicking.
I have a question. This is Sophia. Thanks for that overview. What do people use these reports for? Is it just for internal purposes? And if it's external facing, how do they credit them?
Good question. I would say, I mean, it depends on the user. I think the most of the time I've interacted with, especially funders, it's for internal strategic planning. So, some of the major foundations I've talked to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars uh, hiring consultants to gather all this information historically to inform whether, they may be thinking about a $10 million expansion into a certain geography to address a certain issue. And so this helps internally to get to data points a lot faster on, what the market is, what the needs are. And the other part of it, and this often comes up, is what about community voice? So if this is like sourcing papers and intellectual information out there, what is the community that you may be doing this study on saying about it? And you can actually go find community surveys, or you could conduct your own community survey and then start to input that into this process. But to your question, I think it's often very internal for strategic planning, program design, determining, funding budgets, that sort of thing, of just trying to understand the use. I would say I really appreciate your question on crediting. Part of the prompting, and we may have to just follow through on that, is if you're going to use it externally, you're doing a couple things. You're telling the tool to make sure to cite every study used, every leader that may have been quoted, and to include a bibliography at the end with links to where that information can be found, which is often how we've built it into Complere, which is the platform we built for that purpose. That every time it produces an output, it produces a bibliography so that you always have accreditation to the people producing the information. And then, I think it's great disclaimer on the bottom, especially if you're choosing to publish this as homework you've done, to clarify that you've used the power of, LLMs to produce this information, have, verified it with experts. And like I think there's some value, especially if you're publishing something, to making it explicit that you've used AI to produce this information. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just, we're still in this stage of not knowing if we can trust the outputs. And I think it's just better to sort of disclose. But and I would hesitate to publish something as an official like academic statement
Yeah.
using an LLM. You could put it out there as, hey, this was useful to me. I learned something from this, but to state this as like an academically rigorous paper would be an overstatement, I think.
And I want to add two things, Ryan, to the question. I think it's a really, really good question. Um, Publicly available information is what the LLM captures, right? So all they're doing is synthesizing. So you're not producing deep insights, you're not producing analysis only from this. If it's gonna get published and external, it does require the step of going deeper, um, doing interviewing and unearthing some of the things that might be hidden there. This landscape analysis is a high level touch, right? So I think everything that what Ryan said, plus to go publicly available, I think it has to go through more iterations and evolution. To your question, to initial question, how is it used? In my case, I do a lot of landscape analysis for clients. And in the past, they used to hire me to do exactly the same thing. The evolution with AI is that now I'm expecting them to come with this level of understanding. Before it used to be a first iteration where they had just a high level or no understanding, and I needed to produce this to them so we could have an educated conversation later and go deeper and talk to the communities and develop the right questioning, etc. Now I'm expecting them to come with this, or I provide it for a nominal fee and sometimes no fee at all, saying, read this, make sure you're comfortable, get your experts on board, make sure we're all speaking the same language. And now the landscape analysis goes 2 or 3 layers deeper because now there are the specific questions about a location, a population, a community that you want to find out rather than this high level analysis because the LLM gives it to you really quickly. So I think that is the internal use that I'm experiencing as a consultant, and what I'm expecting from my clients now, right? Use the tool, get yourself to a level of understanding that we could actually start asking deeper questions.
What you're seeing, oh, go ahead. Was someone there following up? Sorry. No? Okay. Sorry if I cut somebody off. Please jump back in if you want to. You're seeing the second prompt here. So I took that from that process we did to create the prompt, took that prompt, put it in here, and then it's created the second part of the sequence of three. And again, we don't have time to read through all of this, but it's looking at trends and organizational mapping, which my assumption is the organizational map is still too limited to really show you the full picture, but it's going to give you high level, and you could actually do a follow on of to that point of like, give me 30 more organizations that were impacted by USAID cuts and understanding those impacts. And you'd get some more information there. And I think on this issue, if you wanted to take it deeper, and you're actually working in the space to like bring light to the issue of USAID cuts, you could contact some of those organizations, gather some voice from them on the real impacts, add those notes into this landscape analysis and start to make it more specific. And that's where, one of the funders I talked to last week, they're using a community survey in any sort of landscape analysis or planning they're doing as a baseline for how the LLM goes to find more information and how it relates to the community survey they have. So that sort of gets to like what Will was saying earlier about, how to give it more context. But you can see, depth of detail. Again, we have to do a check on the data points. And I think Sophia maybe was the one who asked about giving credit. I'm not sure that it's doing that yet because I may not have been that explicit in this first iteration. But if I were to follow up and say, please give credit and create a bibliography, which I can do right now. So it'll now take this document, review it, and make sure it's giving credit to all authors and studies that were used to create this. Um,
And
so,
sorry,
oh,
right? I want to take a second, Janine, ask a question about, besides reference bibliography, how do you make sure that this is actually true? And we've emphasized that in a lot of previous webinars. To add on to the answer that I gave, you can't take it at face value, right? The work needs to happen. You need somebody with the expertise to glance to review it and go, these numbers make sense, to have at least a gut check. But then it needs to be circulated within your organization. It needs to be run by your network where you can see if those numbers are adding up or they're not. The problem is not on the tool. The tool just fetches information based on keywords and finds whatever is available online, right? Is the fact that we don't take the time to make sure that we're following right processes to double check. As if your intern who is very eager and graduated from undergrad 2 months ago came to you and gave you a landscape analysis report, you would do your homework and double check that work, right? So I think that's the same way with the LLM. That's the best that we can do.
Janine,
Can I just a follow-up question? So take, it doesn't grab opinion.
uh, it might,
Okay.
and it's good to be specific in the prompt. So if you say only use peer-reviewed studies or make sure not to include public opinion or let's say partisan public opinion or something like that. Yeah, and your goal is to be objective, non-promotional. Like in your prompting, make sure you're including those sort of directives because the more vague you are in your prompting, the more you have the risk of pulling in public opinion that might be, you know, promoting a certain perspective.
Okay.
And, uh, especially in the large LLMs, you have to be that specific. And so there will be more purpose-built tools that emerge that are like, this is a centrist view on an issue, and it's trained to do that every time. And there's going to be tools that are like, here's your left wing, right wing, this issue is the center of the universe focus. Like it's going to feel more like, oh, this is for this purpose. But the general LLMs, you have to give it specific direction to get that uh, sort of objectivity, if that's what you're trying to get to. So you can see here we ran this last prompt to make sure uh, people were getting attribution and anything. So we have now a bibliography on the end of this document, which is extensive, has links to where this information lives. And you can quickly see if like it's all pulling from Wikipedia or if it's actually pulling from reputable sources. And then you can click through to these and you should be able to find the information if it's legitimate. So I'm scrolling through kind of fast, but it did a thorough job of creating multiple pages of bibliography to help you understand where the information is coming from. I am going to jump to, unless there are other questions, Will, I'm hoping you're helping me pay attention to those.
Yes.
Uh, and see if we can jump back to, let's see, do it this way. Prompt 3, yeah. Okay. Oh, I should have labeled these better.
Did you make a mess? You made a mess.
Yes, I did. All right. So here is the third prompt was essentially synthesize all of this, but it was still a very detailed prompt. And so it took these outputs and then organized it together into another 10-page document. Um, so it's giving you more a summary intro, sort of like executive summary across the, whatever it was, 30 pages of information, some themes. Um, if you're a philanthropic or foundation, here are some entry points to consider in what role you might play in uh, helping with the USAID cuts. So, it's taking the information and moving kind of the step further, which is what do we do with this? And what questions should we be asking? What risks are in play? And then, I love when we do this stuff. So, and we built this as an intentional tool in Complere too, which is I call it additional perspectives, but always ask for counterpoints. Always ask for like, what's another way to look at this because the LLMs want to be affirmative. And so you again have to ask them to give you counterpoints and to be contrarian. So if it's like you get 30 pages of great information, you should also have a follow-up prompt or built into the original prompt of tell me other perspectives on this that might disagree with the points made in any one of these studies or information. Which obviously in any sort of like rigorous process you have to do to gather like a balanced perspective on it. So you can see this document it created is much more of a sort of summary, action-oriented document. And I want to again sort of stop for questions because we're moved through, some basic and sort of like AI 101, which is like how do you build a complex prompt, which we're not spending a lot of time in this session, and we'll do in another session again. Running three different complex prompts to produce somewhere in the range of 30 or 40 pages of information. And that is really just getting the outputs, right? So we got these great outputs, and then as we've been talking about, you have to check them. So either the first step could be checking them yourself. You can also, let me see if I can jump back here. I actually pulled the outputs out of Claude and put them into ChatGPT. And I did this prompt, which is like, check all the data points, tell me where things may be hallucinated, where there's weaknesses, where there's a perspective that's missed. And it produced this output, which again, we don't have time to read, but where it's intentionally critiquing all three of the documents we created in Claude. So it has a section on what is solid enough to keep. There's one up here, it says, because I think I use this phrase, we have to uphold the standard of utmost integrity. So it's looking for things and checking data points and looking for things that we need to double check. So here, has this whole section on where briefs need correction or downgrading. And so what you can then do with this is take it as like the fourth prompt essentially back into Claude and say, address all of these issues. And it'll update the outputs of that information. So it helps to sort of do a first wave of integrity check that's a bit automated. Still shouldn't replace expert in the loop, but at least you can take this step to improve it that much more.
Ryan, Liz is asking if you can show the most recent prompt again, very briefly.
This one I just did.
Yeah, I think it's the one from the double perspective, double checking with different perspective.
Yeah, I can put it in the chat and you can have it. Yeah, so this is a step I do, especially with any sort of knowledge-based work where it's anything's being used to inform strategic work. Like this is a yeah, a very important step to take is check my work. And I do it outside. I go to a different LLM so that I'm maximizing, sort of competitors in the space. to sort of check each other's work. You could also do it in Claude, and I'm sure it would actually find it would double check itself. It's not going to resist that. It's able to check itself.
You use a different project, and we're not gonna get into the weeds, but there's way to keep memory separated in different chats. So it to them it becomes a whole different activity that they're not connected to. So it is possible to do it within same LLM.
Yeah, which is a good call out. If you use a platform like ChatGPT or Claude, you can actually turn your memory off if you want to, but if you have your memory on, it learns how you work, watches your history, so it learns from each chat series you do. So that's also why it's good to set up projects or good to set up move between platforms. Um, I wanted to do one more output comparison in this way. Will and I maybe bat it back and forth on screen sharing, but we took all of the outputs of Claude, so these three documents, and then the summary document, and then I developed a prompt to produce a deck. So I asked Claude to create a detailed prompt to produce a deck that presents all this information, which you can do if you're a Microsoft customer, you can do in Copilot, you could do in Gemini to try and create what do they call it, slides. This tool you're looking at right now is called Lovable. Just like every one of them, they're all like $20 a month tools. And Lovable can create decks, websites, all kinds of stuff. So it's one I've been using recently. I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but it's just the one I'm using right now. Claude can actually create a deck inside of Claude as well. So what this does then is I put this prompt in, I gave it the context of the documents, and you can tell it to give you whatever structure or style and formatting where it's like, I want it to be narrative heavy with bibliography in the footer, and minimal on charts, or the opposite, where it's like, I want it to be all charts, no narrative, and you can get it stylistically to where you want it to be. And the reason I think this is important is because you get volumes of information from outputs doing detailed analysis work, and it's still hard for humans to like read it all, assess it. And so we have to figure out how to turn it into different things that make the information accessible. So once you feel good about the integrity of the information, then you can start turning it into digestible ways of presenting it. I created a deck. You can actually take this into something like Notebook LLM and have it create a podcast, whether you distribute it or not, or just use it to listen to yourself. There are ways to turn this into digestible information. So this just became a 32 slide deck that I was able to create within about 10 minutes after getting the outputs to where I had the time to get them to. There's always more improvement, I'm sure, to do. But these, essentially summarize everything that's in those documents so you can look at them in different ways. So if you're taking it into a team meeting, committee discussion, you want to discuss with your friends, this is just a tool to help you turn it into a different way to look at it. Kelly just asked a question. Let's see. Are they, are we endorsing? No, I mean, we don't endorse anything. Uh, I would say, our recommendation is actually like, if you're a Google shop, try Gemini. There's Gemini inside the workspace, or you can go to just Gemini on its own. If you're Microsoft, try Copilot. Um, I use Claude, and it's because I'm a independent contractor and I don't have an IT department to tell me to stay inside Microsoft or something. So I have more freedom to do that. But start with your native tools first, and then see how far it gets you. And then if you're going to jump to Claude or ChatGPT, we just highly recommend, and this is not advocating for them to get more subscription, is to get a paid subscription because you get more security that way. So if you're just doing the free version and you're doing a bunch of work that you're not sure if you should use to train the system, make sure you're on a paid version and toggling your preferences to what you want them to be.
And
Uh,
I'm also going to add that we do get questions a lot from partners, from clients. What is the AI I should use? Right? What's the best AI? I got $20. What should I get? I've had the same conversations with technology experts from Google, from Meta, and the answer is yes. The one you have access to. What makes the difference is your process. Ryan
mhm.
and I advocate for process. What you see him doing here is because he has 20 years of experience doing landscape analysis and years of experience prompting. I will sit down on a piece of paper and map out step one as the LM, step two. You map it out, you create a process, you create your workflow, and from there you split it and you make sure that you're using the LLM appropriately where it makes sense and where it doesn't, you do not. So there's no endorsement to any of the tools. It's better to be very proficient at one that have 20 and not use them at all. At the same time, like Ryan said, paid versions, please, so you have a saying into what goes outside of your control and what the LLM can digest. We've seen the news about who's working with which departments and what's happening out there in the ether. So protect yourself with a subscription or use the ones that your organization is providing already.
Any other questions right now?
There is one question, Ryan. Lisa's asking, what is the rule of thumb for maintaining privacy of your data?
Yeah, I mean that's the subscription is, number one, like set it up, make sure you understand the preferences and securities in place based on the subscription level. What I've been told is the higher level of subscription you have, the more closely you get to enterprise level security. So if you're at $20 a month, you have some security. I think pretty good security. If you get to the $100 a month pro versions, you're getting the higher level of securities that are more like enterprise level security. And you can turn your memory off. And I think it's just sort of like you have to the how I have always thought about it is like when we first started buying things online and putting our credit card information in, it was like, really, we can do this? And they're not just gonna like take my bank information. We didn't know right away. It was like, I guess so, but I want this right now. And then over the years, we've seen, data has been stolen. There's more security protocols in place. Like that's sort of the stage I think we're at with AI is like they're telling us you can trust them. And to some degree, we are like trusting them. And then, I think as security issues emerge, the industry is going to have to address them. But there's audit firms that I think are doing very well right now because security audit firms because there's a high expectation of security. So, in the platform I'm developing, we have to go through security audit. Otherwise, people aren't going to trust it.
And I'm also going to add to that, uh, going back processes, right? Huge advocate for that. So if you're a single user and you're a solo practitioner, the paid subscription will get you good enough, 80% there of what you need. If you work with a team in your organization, you need some IT involvement. You need to map out folders. You need to know access. You need to know where you put shareable information, what is shareable out, what is not. If you're enterprise level, we're talking about data architecture. That includes also for the LLM. So I think the rule of thumb is at an individual level, subscription good enough will get you that 80% there. As you start involving team members and documents across your organization, get your IT department involved sooner than later. Have the conversation with your organization leaders and put in place simple governance and policies. They don't need to be exhaustive, they don't need to be detailed, but they need to be present that allows you to operate with some protection.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. We are down to the last 13 minutes. We want to keep asking for questions if people have them. Um, I'm going to jump in and just show you very quickly the difference between the Claude, ChatGPT, and then what we've developed in Complere, which is this is the interface. And so what we've done is built detailed prompts into these buttons. So rather than having to type out a very detailed landscape analysis prompt, you can say something simple like this, click on this, and underneath this is a two-page detailed prompt. And it's going to run. I think I actually ran it earlier, but we can give it a second to see if it pops up. All right, so I'll just do this. Here you go. So this is running live right now. So this is essentially doing some version of what we just did in Claude and producing a landscape analysis. And the whole idea here is, I've embraced in this process that prompting is critical. And so we've built detailed prompts into every one of these buttons. So once this runs, if you click on additional perspectives, it's going to give you counterpoint and just in a single click, zero extra prompting. And so this is when I say it, like you'll probably start to hear more phrases like purpose-built tools. So I took what the LLMs can do and turned it into a purpose-built tool for nonprofits, philanthropies, policy workers to do a specific help with a specific scope of work on addressing impact. And so this is one where it's designed to help professionals like yourselves specifically and with integrity in mind. So we have two researchers constantly checking outputs to make sure there's minimal hallucinations or misinformation. So it's constantly sort of improve focused on getting you the outputs that you want. So check it out. We do have about 25 founding memberships left at $100 for the whole year. So if you want to jump in and try it, we'd love to have you. And I'd love your sharpest critiques to improve it. But just wanted to put that one little plug in there. And then also want to make sure you guys have access to our other sessions we're doing. So I'll put that in the chat in a second. But because I know some people will start to drop off at about 5 minutes till, because that's how it always happens in these sessions. So any questions, any use cases you want us to run through since we have 10 minutes left? Somebody can or grab the time. Will, you want to jump in and share your screen?
Yes, I want to, and please add if you have more questions or if you have other prompts that we can do for future sessions. We'd love to get some of that. What I wanted to share with you guys, I built the same process that Ryan did, thinking more in the terms of what if I'm not the expert, right? What if I don't know what a landscape analysis is? That's not my area of expertise. So what I did, I started with a step before, again, my process, right? I drew it out and I said, I need to do some research, a deep research, to understand what is it that a landscape analysis requires. So I had, in this case, Gemini. I'm going to assume that most of my clients use Google Workspace, so they do have access to Gemini directly. And I asked Gemini to create a prompt of what is a landscape analysis and what is best practices and what are the sections that it should have. So when that research came as an answer, I got similar things. It requires this 3 parts, and he gave me the prompts for that. I'm not going to go through the detail of the prompts, but it basically generated the documents, right? The prompts that I need in the research parts. It needs the phase 1, it needs some of the understanding of competition, some of the challenges, some of the gaps. So it's creating the buckets that are required. And in doing so, I'm generating all these results, similar to what Ryan did. This is through Gemini. It's not to my taste, not as high quality as Claude, but again, it's available. It gives you long responses. And then the final prompt is to create a summary report. Now, I did not use Lovable. I think Lovable is a great tool. It requires a subscription, but LLMs are evolving, and I can actually tell Gemini to create a report-like website for me. So what you have here is the summary that is more digestible in the form of a clickable website with the information that is needed. So there's also ways that you can do not at the high level that Lovable will produce, but good enough for internal consumption and in a way that your teams could digest this. So this is another way for you to go through the same process, break down the problem, because usually my clients struggle with, I don't like using LLMs because I told the LLM, write me a landscape analysis. And that was the prompt, right? That was the instruction. Well, that's a complex problem that's actually divided into sections. Have the LLM run its section separately and then put it all together. So I just wanted to share with you guys that similarly, you don't need to have that expertise sometimes. You can leverage the LLMs to provide you to a certain degree. I would not take this outside of my organization. This wouldn't be a report that will publish, but for internal consumption, this will get you, I think, far enough.
Will, we have Adria is raising her hand and has a question. Adria, you want to come off mute?
There's two of us in this room. One second.
Something happened to the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We both have our computers on, so I just had to not use my microphone. I think I just wrote it in the chat as well. And I was interested in seeing whether or not this type of landscape analysis could be done like for a specific country and not just like an overall viewpoint. So we're looking at US government and other donors work, we can even say on like business development in Ecuador. And then the goal for us is to see how we can strategically team up with them as a foundation.
Yeah. Go ahead, Will.
My personal understanding, the LLMs look for what is publicly available online in publications, right? The more specific you are in terms of region and countries, the harder it becomes to get up-to-date information. I think still the use is the high-level first pass, but you would need to partner with a local organization to get you something that we want to emphasize. This is not replacing people, right? The community engagement, the interviewing, the data gathering still needs to happen. The LLM doesn't get you. If the data has not been gathered and collected and made it public, you will not get a report from the LLM.
Right.
So the more specific you are, the more work you have to do. I think it will get you as far probably as the initial conversation with the experts to identify where it makes sense for you to go deeper and fund the specific questions in the project that the LLM didn't capture for you. But I don't think we'll get you further than that. What about you, Ryan?
Well, I would say, yeah, I mean, it's expected to be high level. Don't go into it expecting it to be the perfect in-depth thing with all the information. But it certainly has the potential if you give it your stream of consciousness and say, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what we want to focus, here are the organizations we want to get connected to. Give me some understanding of how that might happen, what the landscape is, where they're working in the context we're working in. Like, put that in there. It'll give you some good output, and then you have to decide, like, is it getting there and what information's missing? And you can go then find that contextual information. So either it's from one of the partners you want to work with or other organizations there that may not be published online, or because you can get those documents or reports, give that context to the LLM, and then it can be a really powerful tool. So this is where it's like it's still a lot faster, more effective at finding lots of information and turning it into something useful for your context. And so sometimes it just takes going to find the information, even if it's manually, and you end up with, okay, I've gathered 6 studies or reports. I can now put this into the LLM with our context, and I'm going to get something valuable. Let's see. Oh, and John, jumping back to your question on like prospect research, I have used it to do prospect research on funders relative to a nonprofit's mission and whether it aligns. And so it has democratized the ability to do really detailed prospect analyses, and even going to ProPublic or other IRS data to look at grant making history from funders and looking at trends of how they do it. Like you can get to a really good prospect analysis or prospect report. And you could even do it in batches. So you could do 5 funders at a time and say, tell me how these 5 funders align or don't align to the work we're doing and what an approach might be to, getting an LOI into their office. And they'll tell you, well, they don't accept proposals. You're going to have to find a person who knows somebody, like the stuff you probably know, but it's a pretty useful tool for developing that stuff. Anybody else? None of the last minute. Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time. Uh, Check out, oh, shoot, I didn't put this in the chat, but let's see if I can do it quick. I'll put our registration page in the chat, and you can go check out other sessions. I'm probably going to add a few more in the next day or two. So you'll see a bunch on there, but a bunch will get added soon. So here's the link to where we have sessions listed. And Will and I will refresh on what's